Hey guys, how's it going? Matt from Foulball Productions here. Thank you so much for joining me today. Hope that you're doing well because I'm doing phenomenally. Thank you very much. This is the 99th episode of the MFer Podcast, and we got a special one for you today. You know how I mentioned I've been I've had some guests on. We had Tom Foe on a few weeks ago. Just had the right-wing coalition announced on Tom Foe's stream that he's going to be on my show at the end of the month, which is awesome. I was keeping that a secret until, just until it happened. But he, confirmed it live, so no reason to keep it a secret. So he'll be here in a few weeks. But today, I have a very special guest. I know that the chat, you guys have praised this guy before and mentioned that you're a fan of his content, as am I. You know what? I'm just going to bring him on, and we'll let him talk about who he is and what he does. Please welcome Atlas Thugged.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I appreciate it, man.
Dude, thrilled to have you. Thank you so much for doing this.
Yeah, no, of course. I didn't know you had Right Wing Coalition on. I need to get him as a guest here soon.
Yeah, well, he's writing a book, so I think he's doing like some promotion to like get the word out.
Interesting. Perfect.
Yeah. So yeah, hit him up. I mean, I invited him on months ago when I first discovered him. And he told me he wasn't doing any podcasts, and he wasn't. But I guess because of the book, now he's out there talking to people. So it's pretty sick. Him and Tom Foe did a collab that just came out today. So it's like I think it's almost 3 hours long. So I'm like looking forward to listening to that conversation.
Interesting. I had no idea. I'll go check it out.
Yeah, there's a lot of ascendancy happening, dude. There's a lot of collaborations going on, and this one as well. So Let me give you just a little bit of introduction because I found you. So the first person I found in, like, let's say the Gen Z right space was Right Wing Coalition. He was the first guy that I found, and I found his Jordan Peterson video. It was about, like, the Groyper kind of, like, turn on Jordan Peterson, and I thought it was a great take. I was like, that was so interesting. What a cool take. And then by way of that, I think next I found Tom Foe, and then Tom Foe put out a video about all these Gen Z right guys who are like badass, and I started following them, and then you just popped up in my algorithm. I hadn't heard of you. I didn't know who you were, but I started watching your content, and I thought it was fucking badass. I was like, this guy, okay, there are like a whole gang of you guys out there, these like Gen Z right guys who are principled, who are knowledgeable, they're educated, they're focused, and I just think it's just absolutely badass. So would you mind just kind of telling, the audience and just whomever about like what it is like that you do like on YouTube?
Yeah, so probably for the last 3 years, I have been like in content creation, and most people probably don't know this. I don't talk about it too much anymore because it had a bad break for me. But I was in content creation and I was on the back end, and so like I worked in like a conglomerate for a bunch of like other like YouTubers, for example. And I wasn't there very long, but I basically did like a lot of not clipping, but sourcing, like content sourcing is the term for it. Okay. So a lot of these people who make like all these React channels, they want like a steady stream of videos with like descriptions that they don't have to kind of go out and look for. They just kind of get on their desk, they react to it. Where's the next one? React to it. Where's the next one?
Okay. Yeah, kind of like when you see like any of those, like a Matt Walsh or something like that, where they've got like the new hot story to go after. Okay, that makes sense because that's actually, I can just say from my end, that is kind of a lot of work to curate all that stuff, to have something to talk about, to have a hot take. It's like, yeah, you might catch a trending topic, but you might not. Right. The internet's a big place.
Yeah, and so that's where I got like the start. And so I was in the back end doing that. I was involved in conservative politics only largely because I was like, from life experience, just becoming more right wing after going to the Ohio State University. I actually dropped out. I had a really bad experience with a baby mama, but ultimately got into YouTube because I needed side money. I needed anything I could do, and that seemed like a decent venture. I was kind of interested in it. And one thing after another, I ended up actually a co-host for a podcast for a guy who had about 30,000 subscribers at the time. And from there is where I started building my own channel. And one thing after another, short story, Israel becomes a big topic. This is where the dividing line comes in. And as I'm kind of getting more sources and more information from people like, Sovereign Bra, Oren McIntyre, Andrew Torba, and then later on, Nick Fuentes, I started really having a hard shift and break away from like his more typical MAGA conservative.
Yeah.
And on the show, it started showing itself all the time. Where like we'd move to an issue.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. I'm sorry. You mean the guy that you were doing the show with, you had a break from his philosophy?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And it was a little awkward because we had been doing a couple of things back and forth where we were like, well, maybe we should do joint streams where we're like, I'll also stream on my channel to see if that'll help. And now looking back, it's like, don't do that. It separates the whole chat. But what it did do was people who agreed with me started going to my stream. People who agreed with him started going to his stream. But we shared one Discord. And this Discord became like this battleground of just like anti-Israel, pro-Israel, and then it just turned into like what you were seeing on like the mainstream media. It was like a lot of this following from his side of the aisle was like, you hate Jews, you're a Nazi, yada yada yada. And then from my side was like, we feel like we're on the right. Like we want to be Christian, we want to be more socially conservative, and it was that natural kind of tension that was there. And I eventually just told him one day, I was like, we can't do this moving forward, because it was moving to a point where it was almost like I was being told, or my topics I'm putting in the outline were being removed or relegated to like lower down the list, because he knew it would bring up Israel or God or Christianity. And so like at a certain point it was like I was doing whole shows talking about Ukraine, and it was like, I don't care about Ukraine right now. Like I want to talk about Christianity, the censorship, freedom of speech, and like he didn't want to move it in that direction. So I eventually just had a hard break, and I was like, listen, we're done. So I paid him out for all the contract stuff that we were signed in. I took a loss on that, but then I made my own way, and here we are.
Now, do you think, because I don't know the guy that you're talking about, and I don't know if you want to mention him by name, but do you think that there was something, I don't want to say like $7,000 Club about it, but do you think there was something malicious in like the fact that he was avoiding these topics? Was he just more interested in keeping his audience happy, or was he just sort of ignorant to the reality?
I think it was a lot more that he was just ignorant to the reality.
Okay. And
if I was to be completely honest, I think it's a lot more cynical than that. I think this was somebody who was much more, their operant value is money. It's whatever made the YouTube channel make money.
Okay.
And so I really think the more I was working with him, I think it was more so that he was looking at what his audience was saying, and he was going towards the audience capture. And his audience was clearly pro-Israel. They didn't want to touch that kind of content. And so I think he kind of decided for himself he wanted to move there. But I wouldn't say the $7,000 Club. I'll be honest, I don't think he's that smart or articulate to even be a part of the $7,000 Club.
That's just always the default, you know what I mean? It's like, oh, you got the money, and it's, I imagine it isn't quite as widespread like that. There's so many creators on YouTube and Rumble and all this stuff, but right. I just wasn't sure if it was like, he was doing it for money, or, because, like, I was dating a girl here in Texas. I live in Texas now, but I'm from New Jersey originally, so this is like a kind of a relatively not foreign culture, but just different culture than the one I grew up in. And I was dating a girl from Houston for a while, and her dad is one of those like evangelicals, like Israel is God's country, right? It's like the Israel from the Bible. That's the Israel, and we need to defend it. Like, dude, this is crazy, but a few years ago, we were doing Thanksgiving, Thanksgiving dinner, and he did a prayer, and his prayer did not include any thanks, for his family, no gratitude. He prayed to eradicate Hamas and the Palestinians. That was his prayer at Thanksgiving. Now it was,
it was like this last Thanksgiving.
It was the one right after October 7th, and what was that, 2023?
Okay, I guess that makes a little more sense.
He was a little hot emotionally, but it was fucking nuts, dude. And I wasn't like red pilled at all. I didn't really know much about it. I didn't really have any opinions about like Israel in that way. I wasn't keyed into that. I was definitely in the Matrix for at that time. But even that, I was like, holy shit, dude! Like, what? Yeah. Like, your family's right here. This is Thanksgiving. No gratitude. No, okay, all right, bro. But yeah, I think that there are
people are captured by it.
People are captured by it. There's a lot of people that's what they know, and that's their worldview. And I think, for myself, like when October 7th happened, I didn't know really much at all about the Zionist entanglement with our government. The fact, all the things about the Iraq War, and just our foreign policy going back to the 40s. I just saw a bunch of what looked like savages slaughtering people at a music festival, and I was like, fuck these animals. You know what I mean? Like, enough's enough. Who gives a shit? And then it was the fact that it kept going. And then what really, let's say J-pilled, what really red-pilled me was, the creator Dave Smith, that guy?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And I was just listening to his podcast, and there were a few things he said, and it was like, one was him just showing like the shrinking of Palestine and the growth of Israel, and the fact that Zionism went back to the 1800s. And I was just like, what? Like I never heard that. Like I was like, what are you talking about? Like my narrative was just like after World War II, they just gave them Israel because, geez whiz, the Holocaust was so bad. I had no idea about all this kind of planning and this narrative, and so basically it was just a few of those things that just like lit like kind of a fuse to like where I'm at now, which is in a far different place.
And well, very similar to you, I was kind of even before October 7th. Because I'd just been involved in politics in general, I had seen like chatter about these things, and I kind of dug into them a little bit just to see where they'd went. But I was kind of sure where I was at with you. Now, I was even less so. Like, I was even less so off the train of like they're savages and whatnot, just typically because the overall feeling I have had from maybe probably even since 2020 was that everything's theater. Like, politics is jester, and there's an element in that which is I can't shake it away. Whereas I feel like in 2022, everybody went back to normal. And I'm kind of sitting here like, from 2020, like if that happened in like 200 years ago, dude, there'd be blood soaking in the streets. Like this is like, we're all as a society just packing it all in and we're just going to move on. There's almost no arrest, nothing's occurring. And that kind of stuck with me as in like, there really is no actual justice in the system. And to me, that implied that there's a stronger control element. Like there's something that's protective about this. And so I'd always kind of thought like, and it was also weird to me that it was clear that its mortal enemy was Christianity. Like it was like the one thing that I always would have to attack. Like Islam's fine, Judaism fine, secularism fine, like literally everything fine outside of Christianity. And then October 7th happens, and I begin with that same framing. I'm looking at this, and then as it continues. And then I think Ian Carroll was one of the ones that really red-pilled me a lot. And that was on the historical ends. He had a great debate with, I think his name is Danny Two Times or something like that. And of course he's an Israeli. But it was like a 3-hour debate talking about the settlements and the Haganah and being founded on terrorism. And then I immediately was like, their whole argument falls on its face. I was like, if three terrorist organizations is what built Israel and founded Israel off of the back of gun smuggling from America in an arms race with the Soviet Union between Egypt and Syria, I was like, the whole thing is being omitted. And I was like, this is just another big lie.
And the whole, I mean, like, I'm 40 years old, so I grew up, like in the Iraq War era. I mean, that was like one of the biggest, I graduated high school in 2003. It was like, I know people who enlisted into the military and went and fought in that war. I almost went and fought in that war. And the narrative around that, I mean, it was the war on terror, it was terrorism, it was Islamic terrorism, Islamofascism, like that was all the thing around it. And it, the narrative was just that these poor Jews, they're just besieged by savages all around them. And then you just do like a little bit of research into the unfiltered history of Israel, and you're like, whoa, dude, like, chill, like, you know what I mean? Like when I listened to Daryl Cooper's Fear and Loathing in the New Jerusalem. Have you listened to that?
I've listened to portions of it. Yeah, okay. He's a good creator.
It's fantastic. I mean, it's the most thorough thing. As I understand it, he literally reads every single book that he can find on the subject before he breaks into these podcasts. And to call them podcasts is really, like, I think a disservice. Like, to me, they're more like graduate level courses on the subject. I mean, it couldn't be more thorough.
Some of them are long too, super long.
This one, I think, altogether is something like 25 hours, 27 hours. It's a long, it's an investment. But it's just, I mean, it's a treasure trove of knowledge. But one of the things that happens is like in the 1948 and the formation of Israel is like they just start shelling civilian settlements, like the victims, right? The victims, they just start, and you're just like, Jesus Christ. And the reason that war starts is hundreds of thousands of refugees are just streaming into all these other surrounding countries, just telling horror stories. And you're like, these are the good guys. Yeah. These are the victims of this story. Okay, it just doesn't sound like that. You know what I mean?
Right. No, right, exactly. And, and I think even if you were to go back, like, if you just go back to, like, 9/11, and go into, like, what you mentioned with the Forever Wars, there was already this feeling that they were linked. No one could really figure out, like, how they're linked, but it's obvious. Most people were kind of like, the foundational blueprint of it is like, well, it's clear as a false flag. We're still kind of picking up pieces. Jet fuel doesn't melt steel beams. How do these passports survive? But then I think the easiest kind of implication beyond there is you go, well, if it was a false flag, the Forever Wars weren't really for anything that we said they were for, for democracy, liberal values in the Middle East. Then would it also not stand to reason that the people who we say did it didn't do it? And then you begin to like dig into that now, not to get, too racy or too spicy. But I think all these connections kind of, they bear out. And what you find the most is when the closer we get to everything, especially like in 2023 after October 7th, we are like actively shunning people who needed FEMA aid from like the hurricanes.
Yeah.
And we're still like dumping, millions and billions of dollars to Israel. And, you can hear like our greatest ally, and all these things begin to like the optics don't match. Mm-hmm. Our greatest ally. So where's the aid packages being dropped off in North Carolina?
Sure.
Right. Where's the Star of David like shining above in the sky, like dropping off, these first aid packages? And they never came. And so I think increasingly it became obvious that the greatest ally element only meant so far as, kinetic and military operations in the Middle East. And I think that's where most people kind of begin the red pill, whereas they see it as that's a clear kind of continuation of the military industrial complex. And Israel serves as like that, guys, but our friends over here, we got to go help them. That's like the start for most people. And I think from there, you get a bunch of factions beyond there of like what they would like to see different. Some are just anti-interventionist. Some take it the full-blown Christian route, which is like, this is said as it was written. And then some go the America First route, which is just wanting the decoupling, but have other ventures that they may want to do militarily. And we're seeing that breakup even right now as we've moved further away from Israel, which is why I think you're seeing like infighting between people like the Groypers and then people like who follow Dave Smith, like the Libertarians. There's different factions, but they're all under this banner that is like anti-Israel. At least we've all just collectively decided no more of Israel.
Yeah, which, I think is a remarkable thing. I was listening to your stream that you did yesterday about it, and this kind of like this like big tent of anti-Israel people, right? It's like it includes like a lot of like liberals who, as you pointed out, and Nick Fuentes pointed out, it's like they would gladly see this country go into the ocean. Like they don't give a shit. And I think that is a fair point, but that doesn't mean that they can't be useful, temporary allies. Like, kind of like the way like George Washington had like a view of diplomacy, like temporary allies. It's like we can use them, to decouple this, like, because there's certain things, like I said, how Nick always says, like, would you just get red pilled yesterday? Did you get red pilled a year ago? And I'm like, yeah, like that's me. But the truth is, I mean, there's just certain things I think that happen, certain things you see that you can no longer unsee. And for me, one of the big things was when it was Candace Owens shared the footage from Gaza, like the destruction of Gaza. Like I have a buddy of mine who was like kind of staunchly anti-Israel from the jump. He had these kind of points of views, and it wasn't reflexive. It wasn't race-based. It was just he's educated on the subject. He's read a lot about it, and he was trying to convince me. And leading into the 2024 election, we were in Vegas for Skankfest. Do you know that comedy festival? It's Louis J. Gomez. He's like does the show Legion of Skanks with Dave Smith.
I've heard that name before. Yeah.
Yeah. And they do this big comedy festival. And so I remember we were there and he was telling me about, he was kind of always trolling me a little bit about me voting for Trump. And saying about how, Miriam Adelson gave him like $200 million or whatever. And I was just kind of like, whatever, dude. Like I brushed it off. But truthfully, it stuck with me. And I was just kind of like, what's that? What is that about? That's a lot of money. Like one of the appeals I always found to Trump was that he didn't need the money. He was above all that. He was the rebel. He was the outsider. Like, that doesn't really sound like an outsider. That doesn't really, never mind. Whatever. We're going to take the country back. Don't worry about it. It's going to be fine. You know what I mean? And like, just went along. And I think there are just certain things that like once you see it, there is no unseeing it anymore. There is there's no going back from that moment.
Yeah, well, I guess the thing is like for me, in that same studious kind of like mindset, which is, the lurk more element, right? People being red pilled yesterday. Yeah. I took that like not personally, but it was like, that is true. Like I did get red pilled yesterday, which means like I'm actually like 20 years behind of what I should actually know. Yeah. And so that's why I try to do with my shows actually is make them a lot more like educational. I'm probably not nearly as good and articulate as neither Nick or Martyr Made, but that's kind of the direction I want to take it.
I mean, first, the thing is, no one is.
Right.
No one is. You know what I mean? There's a reason that like Nick is who he is. Like it's just, I was listening to his show about the Venezuela thing and him just breaking down like the different types of crude oil. And I'm like, man, I have not even heard anyone talk about that. And him like with this like rich knowledge of it. I was like, man, this motherfucker is just on a different level. But anyway, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, well, exactly. I mean, like, and I think I made this comment the other day, which was like, he's the only person I've like ever caught myself listening to outside of Ian Carroll occasionally, where I like will pause. I'll pause and I have to like write down like what he said because I'm getting so much of it. I got to like, hold on, like let me write this down. Whereas like I don't catch myself doing that with like literally anybody else I've ever listened to. And I've listened to podcasts for a long time. I listen to like Timcast.ro.
I find myself with, do you know Scott Horton? Do you know who he is?
Yes. Yeah. I talked with Dane McKnight a few times actually on air, who's like one of the prodigies of Scott Horton.
Oh, okay. Yeah. And I find he's one of those guys where it's just a flurry of names and dates and cabinet members and all this stuff. And he's just, I actually, as I listen to his show and Daryl's show, The Provoked, on Friday nights, and I find there's a lot of overlap with what him and Nick are saying. I know that they have very different worldviews and political philosophies, but their observations and they're to me, they're two of the most educated and insightful guys I know. And I see a lot of overlap. I would personally advocate, I'd love to see a collab on with those people because it's just like that would be huge.
And that's one of the poor things is because there are like Scott Horton is very intelligent, but they are like because of that factional divide, and I think there might be a little bit of a history between the two. I'd have to double check on that. But that's part of it, right? The ego that goes into these things and like not doing certain things in collabs that would be otherwise great. But Scott Horton's like spot on, and I appreciate Scott Horton because that's the way that you have to engage, especially like on the question of Israel or going up against the establishment in such a very like, very not okay way given the political climate.
Yeah.
And because you don't have anything else on your side, right? Like the social institutions aren't on your side. The social climate isn't on your side. Basically, when you go up to say like you want to go against Israel for any reason or you want to go against the American intervention, you have to lay the case out very specifically and accurately, which is what Scott Horton's probably gotten in the habit of doing. Because when you realize you're doing this, the facts actually aren't on the opposition side. So as long as you're able to string together the facts and be coherent from point A to point B, you'll demolish basically anybody else who doesn't have their P's and Q's in order. And so that's why I wanted to start organizing myself that way too. Like people like Scott Horton, which is like you can just be a stream of like consciousness that like just hits.
Yeah.
And it's like no people can't come back from that when all they have are like the two talking points they were given to by their lawyer.
And that's
showed
the
up
thing.
to the Piers Morgan debate.
That was another thing about like, just kind of getting red pilled on this subject is like, I consider myself a very open-minded person. Like I will listen to a lot of different arguments from a lot of different perspectives, not like open-minded in the way progressives use it, which is just like, the opposite. But like genuinely, I'm open-minded to hearing different perspectives and different arguments. And I remember, there was all this stuff like Konstantin Kissin at Trigonometry. He did like a monologue, an episode explaining, why he's now no longer on the fence and he's pro-Israel and they're waging the most peaceful war and blah, blah, blah. And then I watched Dave Smith on Joe Rogan's podcast with Douglas Murray, and you're like, oh, you don't even have an argument.
Yeah.
There is no other side. It's just shut up, you anti-Semitic Jew hater. That's your whole argument. You're like, oh, there's nothing here. Like these guys like have mountains of evidence and dates and names and diplomatic relations and policies and like receipts, and you've just got Israel was promised. It's like,
well, the thing with the Douglas Murray debate with Dave Smith that made it exceptionally good, and the reason why it stood a cut above the rest, was because the main argumentation that was used by Douglas Murray, which came with the famous quote, "Have you ever been?"
You've never been. Have you been to the crossing point?
Have you been to the crossing point?
When were you last there at all?
When were you last there at all?
Well, duly noted, Douglas. Next time, buddy, next genocide, I'll do the courtesy of going to the checkpoints myself.
Because he was appealing to an authoritative, like, an for one, on the majority of it, like, well, you can't talk about this unless you're an expert. And then he also appealed to, well, you just haven't seen what I've seen. So he appeals to these two kind of big fallacies, which we just got over in COVID. Yeah. And the biggest one being the expert one. Like most people are fresh off the heater of like, F the experts. So when he comes in so strongly, and that's his only crutch in the whole argument, which is, well, you're not an expert, you're just a comedian. Everybody saw right through it immediately, and it happening on Rogan only amplified it even more. And have you heard of Douglas Murray since then? He's gone. He had to get shuffled back in because now he's a liability to the SBAR.
Oh, and he was one of those guys that because it's kind of like you were saying with your former podcast partner, is this sort of like this sort of reshuffling of values and this sort of reshuffling of worldview. I've been going through a very similar thing, and it's like before that podcast, like I was excited to see Douglas Murray because I'm like, oh, this guy is so sharp on immigration. Like he's one of those like very good on UK immigration, and that's a tough issue. And I listened to Carl Benjamin a lot talk about that, and like, we have it rough, but I feel like Europe, man, it's like Jesus Christ, it's a sinking ship. It's terrifying. And so I'm like, oh, okay, this is a based guy. This is like a reasonable guy. And then you listen to him, like make no arguments, completely used to just having all the advantages in a media dynamic, like not used to like the knife fight that some of these debates can be. And then, once again, like these people who are very educated, like Dave Smith, it's like he then goes on to list like, oh, this guy was pro the Iraq War. He's been pro every like intervention that just has been detrimental to the United States of America and the West in general. And you're like, oh, this guy, what a terrible, like, oh, but it's like that thing. It's like coming out of the Matrix, the cloud lifts. You just like, you see through so much of this. And you do realize that a lot of these people who are based and right wing, it's like, yeah, no, because like it really just comes down to like one, like that is the one vector, the one angle, that is the hinge of their entire worldview, and you're like, okay, well, this is
and
different.
that defines the neoconservative, and you don't even have to go so far as like their historical consistency. For a lot of these people, they hold simultaneous inconsistencies, and specifically on the immigration thing. You'll look at what say Douglas Murray or insert any other some person from the World Zionist Congress. Their idea of immigration for America is open borders, legal, but with some exceptions here and there. And then, but you go to what's their view on immigration values with Israel? Oh, it's closed borders. It needs to be a Jewish state. It needs to be protected. It's ethno-nationalism. Yeah. And it's so obvious. I mean, these are the beginning of like the very obvious kind of inconsistencies. And you begin to ask the question, like, why? And it's rules for thee, not for me. Mm-hmm. And I think for a lot of people, this has been one of the biggest kind of eye-openers into this, which is not even really exploring like what their people's past are anymore, because that what used to be what it was. Like, what did they do like 20 years ago? Now people just go, what do they think about Israel? Yeah. What have they said about Israel? And it's like, now that's the heuristic. Dude, now that'll decide if you're good or bad.
Bro, so I was listening to you talk about James Fishback, and I was listening to Nick talk about James Fishback. I listened to the Tucker interview with James Fishback or Beck? Beck.
Yeah.
Back. And I was listening to him. And because I remember their video went viral of him like defending the Groypers, like he was like not going to condemn them, and I was just like, whoa, okay, that's huge actually, because it's just like that's brave. You're going to immediately take heat. The Zionists are going to descend on you just in the comments on that video. The second it goes out, so I was like, okay, that shows some stones. But my next question was like, where's he on Israel? It was literally like in my head, I was like, and it's just like because it's like it reveals so much. Even if you're neutral on the subject, it reveals so much.
Right. Because and I think that's actually a great point. That's like even outside of Israel, which is how is anybody neutral in anything in the year of 2026?
Right.
When we're 6 years removed from the saying that got popularized, which is politics has become pop culture. Yeah. And that was largely because everything got amplified during COVID. People were forced to sit inside. And so with nothing to do for months on end, a lot of people found YouTubers they liked and podcasters they liked. And all of a sudden, people who were previously unattached to somebody to listen to are now attached and are in the system. And that to me is, I think, one of the biggest tells. And that goes into a whole other can of worms, but something I talk about a lot too, which is, I see some of these older guys that are like, fathers or like they're firefighters or police officers or just like men in the community, like men that I'm around. And I was a very public person, when I was growing up. I was a bartender at a very popular restaurant. I talked to a lot of people. I met Jim Jordan when I was like, 19 years old. I'd met him multiple times, actually. And what you'll find is a lot of these guys, their value set boils down to, well, can't we all just get along?
Oh, I know.
And it's like, so you believe in nothing. why would I take an ounce of moral advice or look at you as anything as a moral authority? But these are the people who are mayors and they're business owners and they're and what you find really quickly is like somewhere, somehow, there's probably a multitude of reasons for it. But the idea that man needs to attach himself to a purpose was eliminated. And we ended up in a scenario where so many men just simply are looking for how to get money so they can have a home, and that's basically it, and like just not being bothered.
Yeah.
So it's the worst of all the worlds, which is like escapism, retreatism, and also no conviction.
Yeah.
And then you end up in a situation like this, and it's like no wonder why people are so unwilling to actually say something, because maybe the first time they ever even thought about it was yesterday.
Yeah. No, dude, I think you're so spot on about so much of that. Like what you're saying about the can't we all just get along, like that fucking boomer bullshit is what that is. That is kumbaya, Forrest Gump, 1960s slop. And look, it's a fine concept. There's nothing wrong with it conceptually, but you idiots are not taking any lessons from the past 60 years. Like, guess what? It didn't fucking work. Right. It's fine that you thought that. It's fine that you were naive to believe it. That's okay. But deal with the results. And the results are we're losing our country. We're not reproducing. Women are that's a whole other subject. It's a giant rabbit hole. And it's like, so it didn't work. Okay. So maybe we can't get fucking along. Maybe it's not all just, kumbaya, hanging out and, all that just boomer bullshit. And, the thing you're saying about the lack of purpose, it's actually interesting because I was an actor for a long time, and I really studied cinema. Like, I loved film and movie and entertainment, and it was just something that I just jumped into in my entire 20s and a lot of my 30s. It was just I spent all that time. And there's an interesting theme amongst like 90s movies that were made by like these Gen X guys. If you watch movies like Office Space or Fight Club or even The Matrix, is this kind of drone-like reality that they're in, where they're just like, so this is it? I just work for some fucking empty corporation with some impotent limp dick boss, and I have to just, this is what I'm doing. I'm just like at a computer. Like, what is my life? What is the point? What is the purpose? And that's like the thematic arc of these movies, is to realize that, is to like break out of that, is like the freedom from that. That's the point. So it's like it's not even a novel thing that people have been having this crisis of soul, having no purpose. It's been generational. It's like you just see the degradation each generation. At least Gen X, they had the opportunity to buy homes, and they lived in an economy where they actually en masse could get jobs and support a family. But you just see that degrade each more. My generation, your generation, like and the probably Gen Alpha, it just gets worse and worse and worse, and it's like a spiritual and like cultural sickness that just keeps getting passed and exacerbated in each generation.
Yeah, well, and part of that, I think if you were to look at it directly, right? I think the 1800s, even in the late 1800s, was like seemingly for most of America, was like the last of like the greatness of America. Some people would say back in the 1950s. I wouldn't say so. I'd say you need to go back a little bit before then. But again, I attach it to the fact of like what this country was. And so the ethos of this nation was a Christian nation. And to look at like when it began to actually start separating away from that, you do have to go into like the early 1900s with a lot of the adaptation of like where the moral decay started coming from, and like who was authorizing it, right? Who was the authoritative sources behind it? And this is, going to like the Christian elements of like removing replacement theology, going back to, Israel, right? The lie that is the promise to Israel. But it is sad to see that like, even in like the late 90s, you have all these men and the Gen X guys who are making movies and content that is very depressing. Ultimately, when you look at it, it's like very depressing. And nothing got better after that. It was almost kind of like their whispers and cries going into the night, like this is the future. And what we get now is it's like the Matrix is mainstream. And it's the inverse now, and it's very unfortunate because it's almost like this reverse domino effect, because you saw it with like Andrew Tate when he came on the scene, where he finally got this big moment where he says what I call like a fresh breath of air, where he comes out and he says women, like kind of like how Nick, where he's like, women need to shut the fuck up. A bunch of men are being a bunch of pussies. He was like, why are they not going to the gym? Like, yada, yada, could go down the line. And a lot of people immediately were like, I like that guy. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't because, he said it in a really cool way, or like he said it was like with the sunglasses on, it was because nobody was saying it.
Yeah.
And so that's why for a lot of people, it was like, he speaks and they're like, there it is. Like what I've been thinking for the last 4 years, but I was too afraid to say. And then it's ever since then, I think you're getting more and more of these type of people who are coming out. And now we have people like Chud the Builder, who's like going out, filming himself. And he was like, look at these monkeys chimping out. And he was like, go back to your country. And he's like live, like doing it.
Is that German guy? I don't
know
him, Chud the Builder. Is that the German guy?
I don't know how to describe him because I barely know him, but he's like Chud the Builder. He's got a big mustache.
Oh, okay.
He's like a blue collar guy. He's got long dark hair.
Okay.
He recently debated Beardsley, who's like a Groyper general.
Oh, okay. I see. I'm not necessarily connected into all this. Like I put out a video a few months ago about it was that I was wrong about Nick Fuentes. Because I didn't really know anything about him at all. I didn't know where he streamed. I didn't know what he said. I didn't know. All I knew is that that's that like right wing, alt-right, white nationalist guy. And not that I was like opposed to it, but I was like, what a joke. Like I didn't have any like curiosity at all because it didn't reach me. I'm too old. Like it didn't connect. It wasn't in my group chats. I just didn't know. And then he started getting a little bit more mainstream. He did a podcast with Dave Smith. He did a podcast with Patrick Bet-David. And then I was just like, oh, wait, this guy isn't like this devil, that you said he is. He isn't this absolute monster. And I don't remember exactly why I started bringing that up, but it was just because I think like the point is now that like we are more connected, like the information networks that have like developed over even just the past few years. The fact that like I think, it's like I kind of have like sympathy for the boomers. I have sympathy for Gen X because I'm the bridge generation between like y'all and like the prior generations, and I do remember what it's like when you live in a completely captured media environment. I'm reading the Israel Lobby right now. That was written in 2006. And it's one of the most critical books on Israel's relationship with the United States of America. It lays it all out. It lays how it's detrimental. And it's fearless. It goes right at it. And I never heard anyone mention that until like a few years ago. I've never heard that. That didn't influence the conversation one bit. And it's just we had a captured environment. Now it is just, it's wide open. And the cat is completely out of the bag. So I think, to be optimistic is that this is just the most most access to information and truth and clarity and political realism we've maybe ever had in the history of this country.
Yeah. And it's funny because this is the same playbook we're seeing now was the same one that actually was successful against Buchanan, right? Like that actually basically ended any kind of debate inside the conservative circle, which kind of forced the power and consolidated the power into the neocons for the foreseeable future.
Sorry to interrupt you, Trump. Man. I apologize. I remember why I brought up the Nick Fuentes thing. It was going back to your point about Tate, is that some of these things are just so goddamn refreshing when you hear them because you're living in this void, in this vacuum, and there is no like access to that. And once you finally hear, you're like, oh, it's like this breath of fresh air, and it's so invigorating to finally hear someone say that shit, like to put it concretely and say it confidently, and you're like, oh my God.
Right.
And I think that's why the reason those guys had such an impact. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, you're totally fine. Well, I think there's something to that, right? Your body, and this is, not to be super theologian or anything like that, but I'm a Christian nationalist. And I think there's something to that it's reflexive and collective and can be seen across the board that people had this reaction, which was like, oh, they knew truth when they see it. I will know truth when I hear it. And that's what people react to is they hear those things and it's like, you don't have to think about it. You're like, you just know it's true. You know it in your soul that these things are true. Now, it's to the end of that, though, which, you go to like these temporary alliances and stuff. And that's what I wish we could get a lot more of, because it seems like that's kind of, we're like sputtering. It seemed like we got a lot of this momentum, just in like this last year or so, moving to where we are right now. And now I feel like it's splintering on a bunch of different ends, unfortunately.
That's interesting. Can you break into that a little bit? Can you kind of like explain what you mean by that?
Yeah, well, I guess what I would do is so are you familiar with Project Esther at all?
I've heard this thrown around, maybe from you. I don't know. I've heard of it, but I couldn't tell you what it is.
Okay, so I made a mini documentary on it not too long ago.
Oh, the Jews have this conspiracy? They have this plan? What are you talking about? What do you mean? What, they all get together and they want to implement this plan? The next time somebody asks you that or they're skeptical, look up...
Was one of the first things I ever actually made, but I spent a lot of time doing it because I wanted to actually try to be a YouTuber. and not, not just streaming and whatnot.
Boost.
But I got reached out to. So, are you familiar with also the documentary called "Died Suddenly"?
It sounds like something about COVID, but no, I don't.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's what it was. It was a big documentary about COVID. It was put together by a bunch of these guys in the dissonant space. They have like 1 million followers. Now they have a bunch of other movies about a bunch of different things.
Okay.
They actually reached out to me after that and was like, hey, would you be interested in like making documentaries with us? And I was like,
that's cool.
I literally just made my first one. I was like, so I don't know. But I was like, you basically told him like, no thanks, I'm good. But Project Esther though, Project Esther specifically was brought about by the Heritage Foundation, which might sound familiar because we just recently watched Kevin Roberts, who is the president of the Heritage Foundation, get screamed at for 3 weeks straight because he wouldn't disavow Tucker.
I was so happy, dude, when he came out. And because I was just getting on the Nick train right around then. I was just really becoming like a fan right around then. And I knew how controversial it was going to be. And my X feed for weeks was just full of tweets and tweets and tweets about how this guy's the worst and Tucker's an anti-Semite and you need to disavow. And then this guy comes out and he's like, we're having conversations here. We can say whatever we want. We're just going to talk to these people. It doesn't mean we're anti-Semitic. And I was like, fucking based. And then, of course.
Yeah. Well, and so the thing was so these things are all connected, and this is part of the reason why I place so much emphasis on my guys who listen to like Be Studious, because they all connect, and when you see it, it becomes easier to actually talk about. The Project Esther was formed on the anniversary of October 7th in 2024, and it was built off the back of what they deemed to be the biggest threat to Israel, anti-Semitism. Mm-hmm. And so they, once again, following the same playbook of the I think there's the 2008 handbook for the Hezbollah campaign, which was it's not about land. So it's like that was kind of their playbook. It's not territory, it's terrorism. So the whole goal is like, don't make it seem that the reason why Gaza is fighting you or Hezbollah or Hamas is because they feel they have a rightful claim to the land. Make the narrative that they just hate you, that they're violent savages, that they have no rightful claim, that the only reason they're fighting you guys is because they just hate Jews. And like that was kind of the opening playbook. Project Esther is the American continuation of this. So Project Esther comes out from the Heritage Foundation, and it lists out numerous goals, multiple desired effects, multiple necessary conditions, a plethora of things that they would like to see done. And Democracy Now!, which is, obviously they're Democrats, but Katie Baker did a good segment on Democracy Now!, and she's an investigative reporter for the New York Times. And she even said, this is about a year ago, about halfway through 2025, that we had already established about 40 to 50% of the necessary conditions of Project Esther. And so we were already halfway through there. And so you might remember early on in the administration, we weren't getting deportations at all. And the only deportations that were actually happening was heavily emphasized on left-wing campuses. And it was all under the banner of deporting these like anti-Semitic, Hamas sympathizers. And that was in line with Project Esther.
That was one of those things, sorry to interrupt you, but that was one of those things we were talking about earlier that you can't unsee. I remember that, and I remember rationalizing it away. I remember being like, well, if you come to a foreign country and you criticize the government of the country that you're a guest of, it's like you shouldn't be shocked when you get kicked out. And there's still some truth in that. But the real truth in that is, why are they so critical of these people? Why are they so quick to throw them out? And you're like, that's really the bigger story. That's the bigger truth in that. And I remember, like I said, I justified it. I ignored it, but it stuck. It was one of those things that just sticks in your brain, and you just, it starts working on its own. Yeah. And then, now we are where we are. But please continue.
Anything that's like that, that's like a good question. You're like, wait a minute, why is that? Mm-hmm. And because now look at it, like, why was the emphasis there on college campuses? And apparently since 2014, we've had Somalians, to the tune of millions and billions of dollars, been taking stuff from Minnesota and otherwhere. Yeah. But Tim Dillon had like a very viral moment on this when they did the plainclothes, raid, where they took the one writer who had wrote an op-ed against Israel. Mm-hmm. But the point is because college campuses in the United States of America have been notoriously the fighting battleground for politics. You see this in Charlie Kirk. You see this with Myron Gaines, and I forget the network that he works with, Uncensored America. Forgive me. And all of these, obviously, these campus debates. But at the same time, even historically, when you go back to the incidents of protesting against Vietnam, all of these times It's the college campuses, because college campuses are seen as the most liberal area. They have the most leeway to be able to say what you want to say without, being chastised for it or being attacked for it, because it's a place to go and have free discussion. It's a free market of thought.
Yeah.
But they do this to add a chilling effect, that this is the one category of thought that's unacceptable. And you do it at the college campuses, so then you take out the college campuses very quickly, try to remove them as a threat of being in pushing and organizing anti-Israel sentiment. And that's just one wing of it. The second wing that I'd point to, and it's a very comprehensive project, but the second wing I would point to is one of their desired effects is, after they identify who are the organizations that are actually anti-Israel, once they get them and they identify them and network them, they label them as HSOs, right? Hamas Support Network, right? HSN, HSOs. But further than that, their plan is they want to infiltrate those individual groups and make it so they don't trust each other. So infiltrate the separate factions of the anti-Semites and make the anti-Semites turn on each other. That is one of the that's one of the desired effects. So much so that what you're seeing right now, I would argue, is already happening, where you have these big semantic debates between all the anti-Israel groups, where I would say you have like Candace Owens and Ian Carroll kind of represents like an anti-Israel faction. You have also maybe a bit more like Dave Smith and Clint Russell, anti-Israel faction. Then you have the more kind of safe space, more like Orrin McIntyre, Andrew Torba, anti-Israel. And then you have
that's
the
well put. Safe space, dude. That is
Right?
so well put, because I have listened to Orrin McIntyre talk about that, and it's like just the most delicate tiptoeing into that water, but like just I'm just a nationalist. I just care about it, not really getting into it. And I will say, in defense of Nick Fuentes, because he was on when he was out in the cold for a little while, and he was talking, he went on Candace's show and talked a little bit, not shit about Dave Smith, but kind of said things that were sort of like, well, they bring him on because he's Jewish. Now that isn't true, but what is true is the fact that Nick goes all the way. He gets into the Jewish oligarchy in the United States and connects those dots. Everyone, a lot of people do conveniently talk about it's a foreign nation, and that's a great place to start. And I think for a lot of normies, it's probably a good place to just stay. It's just like, I think a lot of people, you red pill them too quickly, too aggressively. They're just, it's not going to be, it won't be productive.
It won't stick.
It won't stick, and it's probably the light's too bright. But I do think that he was right in the sense that he goes all the way. Like, he's the one who will break down the whole Ellison thing. Now, let's say that Dave Smith and Scott Horton don't talk about that, but he talks about the network, and he talks about the influence networks, and he talks about like the Jewish Republican Congress and all these things, and just really breaks it down. And he is the only one doing that, as far as I know, except for maybe, guys like you guys like probably a Right Wing Coalition, Tom Foe. But I mean, like, as far as like the voices in the space that are, really prominent, he's the only one that really goes the full length. So I think, in defense of Nick Fuentes, I think he was correct in a way. I don't think he articulated it great with Candace, but that was a hostile interview anyway. But sorry, going back to your project, Esther. Oh, I do have one follow-up question. Just as far as you're laying all these things out, How did you come across this information? Like, how did you establish that these are the ways that they're going about this?
Yeah, so it's because they brag about it. You can go right now to Heritage Foundation, Project Esther, and the whole manuscript for the entire program is literally on their website.
That's fine.
You can Control F and look up all the things that I said if you want to. And part of it is because they have dominated the social landscape, and like you had said, they had consolidated media for so long. They don't fear that because they know that the power of calling somebody a racist, or in this case, an anti-Semite, is so strong, no one's even going to come close to touching it. And you're even still seeing it after the generational run from Nick, like you just mentioned with Orrin McIntyre. There are still guys who what they actually feel, but they tiptoe around it because they want to avoid that song and dance. And the crazy thing is, I would pose this too, because maybe you might not just have seen it yet because if Nick is new to you, but Nick is now becoming the moderate, which is an insane thing to think about. But there are people that I've known and have been even a bit more public than Nick that exist much further to the right of him. And that would begin to rope in people like, I would say, Stone Choir. I would rope in people like Joel Davis. This goes into like Thomas Sewell. This goes into like the actual like white nationalist that's not full blown attached to Christian nationalism. Now, Stern Choir would be Christian nationalist, but there is a growing base of just pure white nationalists, that are coming from people, and it's combining elements of like paganism as well.
Yeah.
I don't know how much of that you've seen coming back.
I've heard a
but
little
there'll
bit
be
of it,
people like
yeah.
Handsome Truth, that like he's very anti-Israel, anti-Jew, but he hates Christianity.
Yeah.
So it's like this other kind of weird network. And so you're seeing, as Nick moves to the mainstream, what you're also seeing to the right of him, filling the void where he used to be, is people who are even further to the right of him. Hence, it's just the nature of the Overton window.
And you think, is that contributing to the fracture you're talking about?
Yeah. That's like a natural contribution to the fracturing. But I would say, too, like, think about it right now. Like, Candace Owens, and I don't know how you feel about Candace Owens, and I've avoided just covering it, because at a certain point when I was following it, I was just like, this is going nowhere.
She's a needle in a haystack. I think, there are great moments from Candace. Like, I was thinking, I was watching your show, and I was like, God damn, that's a fire intro. I got to do something like that. I got to put something together like that. That is so badass. But I was thinking, I love it. And I was thinking about things that like, well, maybe I'll put together things like that influenced me politically. And I do remember years ago when Candace Owens was in front of Congress and she dressed those people down so aggressively. And she's just like, if I could create a list of 100 things that were problems in the black community, white supremacy wouldn't even be on it. And it was so articulate, and she nailed it.
Things that I said today that are actually harming black America. Number one, father absence. Number two, the education system and the illiteracy rate. Illegal immigration ranks high. Abortion ranks high. White supremacy and white nationalism, if I had to make a list again of 100 things, would not be on it.
And she also did, this was when she was still with the Daily Wire, she did that documentary about George Floyd. Now, it wasn't incredibly well produced, but in it, there were some really revelatory realities and facts and things about it, about his family and about some of the BLM scam. And this was years ago. This was before that was just kind of common, perspective. It was pretty good journalism. So, whatever she's doing now with all the Charlie Kirk stuff, I think it's wacky. Like, it's weird you mentioned Clint Russell, because he kind of latches onto a lot of this, and I find him to be relatively like intelligent and analytical.
And rational.
What's that?
He's a very rational person.
Very
His
rational
attachment to
person.
Candace has been throwing me for a loop, too.
It's throwing me for a loop. I don't really understand it, because when I watch her show, I can barely parse through what the fuck she's talking about. And it's like, you got all these like moms at home who are doing your investigative journalism. I'm like, I'm sorry. What are we doing here? Like, can you come up with a conclusion, please, before like you just every day it's it's like an episode of TV. It's like next week on the Candace Owens Charlie Kirk show. You're just like, this is fucking crazy. I don't know. So it's
becoming a meme. And
it is a meme.
The thing is, I would extend that grace to Candace for her being a temporary ally. Like, and I've said this a lot of times, and people don't like it because obviously the Gripers, really like are anti-Candace, but she would be perfect. She perfectly matches that temporary ally. Like, very good when she's strongly opposing Israel, but it's also really bad when she's talking about, like, I don't know if you've seen the latest stuff, but supposedly she's now saying that Charlie Kirk is a time traveler.
I heard Fuentes talking about this last night.
And so, that's what makes, but that's why you can't have the temporary alliances, right? And this is part of the reason of why he's actually generally against Ian Carroll, too. Although Ian Carroll is much less so of what Candace has been recently, which is when you're really trying to make a very strong and factual point about Israel and the Jews, what you can't have beside that is also like the moon landing was fake, flat earth theory, cloud, like all that stuff. Also, if you see it all together, it makes the Israel one look just as fluky.
And apparently
that's conspiratorial.
That was a CIA prerogative, was to do that a lot, was to just kind of like, I think it's called flooding the zone, where you just like you throw out like flat earth and you throw out all these other things, alongside things that are real, that are documented, like MK Ultra. You throw out, all this other stuff around it to just make it seem like, oh, all conspiracy theories are nuts. Because that's the thing, like even that term conspiracy theory became synonymous with nut jobs, with, the tinfoil hat people. Like it was before memes were memes, it was a meme, and it was that was the perspective, and it worked. It was effective. So I imagine, and this is weird because this is a self-inflicted one. This is one you're creating. You're doing the CIA's legwork for them.
Right. Well, think about that. Right. We went from that period of time that we lived through, which was like, oh, they're just a conspiracy theorist, to Alex Jones was right, Jar wins again, to Candace Owens is like single-handedly going to put us back to, oh, you're just a conspiracy theorist.
Yep.
Like, that's how quickly and how just off the page some of this stuff is coming from.
Yeah.
And it's really nonsensical. And to me, like what you had said, very incoherent. And you feel like you might get an answer next week on like you're just hoping at some point you'll find something reasonable. But the reason that I bring her up is not to attack her. I agree with you. I think there's a lot of stuff that she's done that's good, but I also say there's a lot of stuff that she's done that's bad. But for the stuff that's good, I'll praise it. The only thing is now that these factions are all attacking each other, which is taking away from the collective idea or the collective agreement that should be, which is nothing matters until we decouple from this nation.
Yeah.
And then from there, we'll hash out our differences, but we're not getting there yet. And a lot of that is coming, and it's stemming from, I wouldn't say from Candace or Nick directly, or from Dave Smith directly, or from Clint Russell directly, but it's coming from the factional people. So it's the people who are like in the Candace cult who see anything from Nick or outside of that, and they're like, oh, you just hate Candace, you just hate black women. Vice versa, the Groypers are like, go make me a sandwich, watch. I find that funny. But at the same time, there's this divisiveness that's happening, and it's separating the factions.
Yeah.
And now this next wing is separating the left and the right from each other again, which is because of Renee Nicole Good. They're driving that, which is now you're seeing a bit more of this, where the full-blown anti-interventionist is showing itself. And now on the back of Venezuela, this is now an avenue to attack Nick. And everyone's like, see, he flip-flopped. And it's like, he never flip-flopped. It's just that because the last 2 years, he's only primarily talked about Israel and Iran, a lot of people have built it into their heads, and they came to the conclusion themselves that he's full-blown anti-interventionist and just wants domestic powers at home, isolationist.
Yeah.
But that was never his take.
No.
So to them, did they see these clips of Shadow of Ezra or from Clandestine, these big conspiracy accounts that are attached to Candace, and they post Nick flip-flopped, it further drives it down to them that he's like some kind of asset or a Fed, and he's the fake one.
Right.
And it's Candace's side that's true. But if every side's doing that, every side's, it's the Spider-Man meme. And you're getting a bit more of that kind of the Fed thing, but now it's becoming a lot more far-reaching. And when we're already in a zero-trust society, it's not going to give any positive consequences.
That's very interesting you say that. I think, I was listening to yourself talk about your philosophy, and then kind of like what is your philosophy? And it made me kind of think about it because, like I said, a lot of this is new to me. A lot of it, what'd you get red pilled a year ago? Like, yeah. So it's for me, it's kind of like I take a lot of information in, and I think, I like, because I don't think the libertarians are ever gonna achieve their goals, even if they were some kind of a majority. I think they're almost as delusional as socialists in a way. The only difference with the libertarians, I think their math works, whereas I don't think the socialist math works at all. But the point is, like, yeah, okay, if we're going to undo everything that happened in the 20th century, yeah, fine, okay, but that's just not, like, that's just as delusional as, like, we're going to release, we're going to get to a utopia. But why I do like the libertarians is because they're like a stern principal. You know what I mean? They're like a good, let's say like a good high school principal. It's just like, no, these are the rules. This is what I like. And we're all just, it's like a good, like, you don't take all your insight or all of your advice from them, but they are very consistent and they have very consistent values. And I like to listen to their criticisms. I mean, before the whole kind of MAGA coalition, the whole MAGA movement fell apart, like the libertarians were the ones that I would listen to in their criticisms of Trump because I knew they were coming from a principled place. It wasn't a triggered lib place. It was that they have real reasons, and like while they will defend what he does when they like it, and when it aligns with their principles, and attack him when it doesn't. And it's like, I like those guys. I think those guys are valuable for their insight. Whether or not, when Nick ascends to emperor, he takes their insight or not, it's just a matter of like, I think those guys are valuable, as far as political insight, political, critique,
Yeah. No, and I think so too. And I think that's actually in effect, I think that ultimately is both for the libertarians in their commentary form, but also in the party. That's like their primary effect. It's not what can they do positively, but it's like how effective are they in damaging the other parties near them? And that seems to be like what they are. When people talk about the Libertarian Party, they're typically talking about it for a term of like, who are they going to hurt more, Democrats or Republicans?
Yeah.
And then just like you would frame there, libertarians are typically the ones right off the back of something that seems controversial, be the first ones coming out with a statement. You'll see it from like Ron Paul or Dave Smith or Clint Russell. And it is because they're so close to their guns on their principles.
Yes.
The only thing is with the Libertarian Party, and I called myself a recovering libertarian for a long time, was the element of which when action needs to be done swiftly and urgently, and you do need to direct the nation, right? And with libertarians, they have their own kind of batch of issues, which is one of the first ones would be, are we talking big L or little L? Are we talking New Hampshire libertarian? Are we talking open borders libertarian? Are we talking? And so their principle sets in terms of like the broad sense is very strong, but on the minor sense, it's not. And so, for example, I was at a libertarian event, I said I've been like 3 or 4 years ago, even 5 years ago at this point. And I believe this was around the period of time when they were discussing like, will they give their blessing to Donald Trump? Like, or will they turn the blessing to Donald Trump, or will we keep pushing for RFK? And there was somebody else. It's like Rechtenwald, I think. I remember the name. And
there's like Chase Oliver.
Yeah, Chase Oliver. There's like 4 of them that were running at the same time.
Yeah.
It's hard to remember. It's been so long, and I quit paying attention to it.
Sure.
But what you would see was there was arguments over like these libertarians were only there because they wanted to decriminalize drugs.
Right.
These libertarians were there because they only wanted. And so what you realize is the libertarians are actually the ones who show up in force are all a bunch of people who have like specific things they want decriminalized. And it's like, that's all that really unites them. Well, it's like they want decriminalization, but each one is like categorically, it's like, end the war on drugs, end the war on terror, it's all of this, like, by the way. And so to me, it's not unified on a kind of set of positive principles.
No.
And Andrew Wilson did the best, I think the best loss of Dave Smith's career was from Andrew Wilson. And this is about 2 years ago. And Andrew Wilson gets him on the force doctrine. And it was brutal. I mean, it was brutal. Yeah, I would encourage anybody who's a big Dave Smith fan to go watch Andrew Wilson and Dave Smith's debate from about a year or 2 years ago.
Oh, I will definitely watch that, yeah.
Because Dave Smith makes some solid points in there, but for the majority of it, Andrew Wilson like really lays down like a lot of the flaws in libertarianism, but specifically it goes to the force doctrine. And like might makes right, and some of these kind of principles that libertarians don't have much answers for. It was really good, and I think if you want to learn something, go listen to that debate. I listened to the whole thing. I think I listened to it twice, actually.
I will definitely listen to that because I think the problem with libertarians, like the problem with good libertarians like Dave Smith, Scott Horton, Clint Russell, these guys who are just, like I said, incredibly knowledgeable and principled, is all the other libertarians. Is these people who you listen to their ideas, they're like, oh, you're not a libertarian. You're like super woke.
Right.
You just found a way to like even less restrictions on all your degeneracy. Like you're a hedonistic anarchist. You're not a libertarian. Like I've had not arguments just because I'm like, you guys are crazy. But I've had discussions with libertarians where it's just like they don't even believe in the Constitution. And it's like, well, what the fuck do you believe in? Like, what are your values? And it's like they want some weird, like, I don't even know how to describe it, where everyone's like, it's like an orgy with drugs and no borders and guns, and you're just like, guys,
like be a narco-capitalist.
But even like, it's even less principled than that. Like, at least that's like built on like these guys. It's just like they want no rules at all from the state whatsoever. It's just like, okay, you guys are fucking crazy. This is nuts. But I want to switch topics a little bit because I had a question for you, and something that you had messaged me, which I didn't quite understand. But what is the New American Vision? What is this that you're doing?
Yeah, the New American Vision. Yeah, so this is, we co-founded this together between myself, Josh Vandernoord, Zeb Boykin, and John Ward, with the help of a few other people who are on like the managerial side.
Okay. And
that was kind of the idea. My idea with it was the slogan that I say all the time, which is the one network that's not afraid to say Christ is King. But the broader point was that it was clear that the youth, and I think this is a big tell for a lot of things, even outside of Israel, but it's very obvious when you can tell that almost on every single issue, the youth is oppositional to the elders, right? It's like the boomers and the Gen Z do not see eye to eye at all.
Right, okay, yeah.
And so there's like a bigger divide than just like left and right. The divide is now moved to the value sets haven't changed so quickly that the generation didn't even die off before they were able to, before their era was over. And so, for example, it's like the boomers, in a timeline with justice, the boomers would have been able to live out their days and end before seeing the Gen Z turn on them. But because there's so much like rapid innovation and technology in the AI race and the arms race and psyops, we're seeing things move at a much faster rate. And so Gen Z is entering their era before the boomers left theirs. And the reality is the boomers era ended and they're still around.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like providing for this huge kind of disparity. But the new American vision is, in my opinion, it is the idea of like what America is supposed to be. And we have lost that. And much like the way that, America's focus of the theater of war in the Middle East has been the last 25, 30 years, we've not focused on events here, domestic issues here. And I think more than anything, it probably does more so reflect just the general ask from most people in the youth for a more socially conservative society. And at the same time, also wanting to move away from everything that would be censorious too. And so John Ward is one of the founders on the team, and he's not I don't think he would say he's a Christian nationalist, but I'll let him say it for himself. And he poses a bit more of this libertarian kind of worldview, where the idea is we want to have open conversations, but like the left isn't going to be here, right? It's like we're setting this up specifically with the idea that like we're only ever going to engage with leftists or like left-wingers, or the idea of like breaking down their arguments. And I think you even got a little bit of this symbolically with the unfortunate tragedy of Charlie Kirk. Like the debate from that side of the aisle is over, and
there
now
is
it's
no
time to have
debate.
new discussions.
I was thinking that exact thing when I think I was listening to you, or maybe I was listening to whomever I was listening to, and I was just thinking, it's just like you lost those debates. You don't have any wins on your side at all. You're not even anti-war anymore. Like you don't. There's really nothing that you've been right about at all. No economic policy, no social policy, no like nothing. You don't have a. I'm not wasting my time. I put out a video about Renee Good the other day, and it's just like this whole concept of these ICE protests is asinine. We're not asking you. We don't give a fuck. We heard you. You know what I mean? We had this conversation. We've been having this debate. You had no good faith. You do not grapple with the realities. You do not grapple with the economics. You do not grapple with the demographics. You don't deal with any of the things that we are concerned with. So we're done. We're done with this kind of back and forth. Like the debate is amongst the right now. We're not even wasting our time including you, because all you're doing is just poisoning the well. You're just muddying the waters. You're just you take the conversations in places and about things that they are not about at all. So I'm 100% with you. I'm just over that. We heard you. You were wrong. You didn't take the L, and we're done engaging with you at all.
Yeah, well, and I would even go so far as to say too, like it needs to be like a just society would see somewhere where it's like Nick Fuentes can be seen as a liberal, right? Like that, like that's the kind of the society like that I would like to be moving to. And what I would also say, and this is a bit more baseline, where people weren't given the tools, like especially in my generation, now they're finding themselves, but even the generations prior, millennials, and I would even say Gen X as well too, they weren't given the tools that they would properly need if they were ever faced with an enemy at their front door. Everything that they go through with education to elementary school, all of it speaks to things like, the Civil War. And they talk about how everything was bad there and violence is bad. And you're kind of left with this kind of imprint where like all violence is bad, like no matter what. You got to seek, to do whatever. And so, yes, that is. But what's omitted from that discussion is there are clearly times where like you have to. You have to defend yourself. And that's what's been left out of the discussion. And I think you see that across the board, which is it's very obvious to me that the left wing needs to be, and for lack of better words, it needs to be excised from American society in whatever form that would be the most humane from that, but it needs to be eliminated from it. And it's like everybody knows that, but it's like nobody's willing to do what is necessary for that to happen. And that doesn't mean like sending people off to camps, but it does mean like hardcore monarch, like strong executive authority that comes in and says, this is over. That comes in and says, Jasmine Crockett, Tim Walz, Ketanji Brown Jackson, you're all going to jail. Every single one of you know that you shouldn't have been in the positions you are in. You are traitors against this country. But the thing is on the grassroots side, because so many people have this kind of socially reinforced idea of, what the boomers say, like, just get along, the youth are rejecting it. But at the same time, a lot of people are stuck, like, they can't make that jump over the hump in their head, which is going from, like, is this person my enemy? And it's like, what more do you need to see when they're screaming at the top of their lungs? They're trying to dox ICE officers in an attempt to get them harmed, injured, turn them in, make their wives widows. At a certain point, you have got to jump over that hump. And it seems like because of the social reinforcement we have in our society and just the overall feminization of society, so many people are unwilling to do that. They just can't. And they can't convince themselves to do it, that it's the right thing to do. And I think, to me, that is a result of abdicating and outsourcing so much of masculinity that you have removed the kingmaker ability to adjudicate and say, you know what? No, not my people. You're not doing this to my people. So, but that is gone. And like that kind of sentiment is like removed from the average man. We need more of that because we're not going to escape without that. And the same thing applies to feminism at large as a sidebar. But feminism will never be voted out of this country. It will require somebody coming in as a leader, as like a king who says, show up to the voting booths tomorrow. If you're a woman, I will arrest you. Because I think that's the only way that you're going to get feminism to start in society.
You know, it's funny. It's funny you bring up the feminism because I watched your video on Ashley St. Clair, and I was
Awesome.
like, yo,
Thank you.
that was fucking great. And it's the launch of a new series, which I think is spectacular, and so much meat on that proverbial bone. Because I think you're right. So I'll let you tell. Like, please talk about your new series because I think it's fantastic.
Well, I appreciate the plug. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the new series, that's been an idea I've always had in the back of my mind. I feel my forte is more so in feminism than it is in like Christian nationalism or race realism, etc. And the idea is really to explore, like in real time, IRL examples of the consequences of feminism. And so for the first episode, I did Ashley St. Clair. And Ashley St. Clair, to me, I wanted to do her for the first episode because she represented like what we had just moved away from in the conservative right wing as of like a few years ago, which was this kind of internet persona girl like Ashley St. Clair or Lauren Southern or the redheaded libertarian, but she's still around. And it's all these girls who push and praise and say all the things to the Republican Party, but they omit when it comes to like feminism or like socially conservative values about like how women should behave. And if anything, they're there as like stopgaps to actually push for feminist values inside of the conservative party. Mm-hmm. And I used Ashley St. Clair because she didn't hide it. You know, she was not a covert feminist. She wasn't pretending that she was a Christian, but giving like these different interpretations of marriage. She was full blown saying to people in their face that women aren't heard enough. And in 2022, women aren't heard enough, right? The conversation's only about men. The whatever podcast is just hateful. But to the average person who goes outside goes like, what are you talking about?
I mean, like, if there's anything we've gotten way more than we could ever need, it's the perspective of women. I mean, that was one of the reasons I got into YouTube, not specifically as like a bulwark to feminism or anything like that, but like, it was because I was in Hollywood. I was pursuing a career in entertainment. I love movies, and all the things I love became completely feminized and cucked, and they were destroyed and gutted. And I was amongst the most toxic, anti-male, anti-United States, anti-Western, anti-capitalism, anti-patriarchy, anti-everything type women. And it was just, it was you're drowning in an ocean of this crap. And that was one of the reasons. That was the reason I got into YouTube. That was my vector into it to begin with. It was the Critical Drinker. I think it was because I started watching his takes on Game of Thrones and its destruction, and then from there I found Gary from Nerdrotic, and I found Mahler, and I found all these media critics, and I was like, my people, like I've been here like a soul, like a voice, like a communist double agent, you know what I mean, in LA, just like okay, keep it, don't let anyone know, and that you feel this way. Level. And then all of a sudden I was like, oh, there's all my people on the internet. I had no idea, because of just how nefarious and malicious and infectious like feminism thought, that kind of critical theory from a gender perspective, how bad that has been for the country, for media, for discourse, for just the both the genders in general. It's been absolutely destructive. And I just, like, when you said that, when I heard like that concept of that video, I was like, bro, yes, dude, because this is a rot. This is a tumor that needs to be, excised.
Exactly. Right. And with that Ashley St. Clair one, I just wanted to show like, and a lot of these women, you'll find this true of them as well. Like, they will give tells that show, like and Ashley is a great example of this. Her primary value was feminism. like everything else faded away when feminism was threatened, or like when women were being, you know, criticized, all of a sudden everything gets dropped off. And that's what was insane. I think the biggest tell in there was like, and you saw the video too, but like when she goes on the Trigonometry podcast, and you can even see the reaction of not Konstantin Kaizen, but the co-host, when she's like, and they need censored off of YouTube. And he like, his eyes raised for a second. He's like, wait, what?
Yeah.
What did she just say?
Yeah.
Because 2 minutes earlier, she's praising Elon Musk for purchasing X and opening it up for free speech and bringing people back on and telling Disney, you know, F off. But the whatever podcast needs to be nuked off the platform, and everybody liked them too.
Right.
And it's like, so what principle do you really have? Free speech, unless they're criticizing women.
Which is just
what I want to explore with all these
absolutely
people.
nuts. I mean, what a line. And it's like, we had just lived through all these years of censoring, you know. It's like those that meme of that little warning or whatever that would come on the bottom of your videos when you talked about certain issues like flat earth or climate
COVID-19,
change.
actually.
Yeah, it would be, you know, it's like we finally like came to the surface, and now we can breathe. And this chick is like, you know, we really need to do is censor people who talk shit about women. It's like, bitch, shut the fuck up. Like, you know,
Right.
that is a make me a sandwich moment. But no, she's one of those people where it's like this, you know, she said the right thing. It's something that I noticed actually with, it's less of an issue now, but it was the trans thing. Going back to like my observations of like Mahler, like the YouTuber. Do you know him?
I've heard of him before. I think I know what his profile picture looks like in my head. But
Yeah, it's like some guy with like a gas mask and like red eyes, and he does these extraordinarily long form critiques of media. I find them really interesting. I don't really listen to them as much anymore, but for a while I was interested. And someone in his like community, someone like in his little group, went trans. And I remember I was following them, either it was on Instagram or Twitter or whatever, and then he posted a picture of him like in like a dress and like his legs out and stuff like that. And then I saw in the comments, I was like, oh, this is what love bombing is. It was, everyone was like, oh, she fierce, so get it, girl. Like all this
Slay
kind of
queens.
swell. Yeah, it was like this swell of positive reinforcing energy to like, you know, basically like to validate, oh, you made the right decision to become a freak. But I think like Ashley St. Clair is probably experiencing a similar thing where it's like, oh, here's a based hot chick, you know, just so much positive energy, so much positive reinforcement. And it's just like the second, you know, it didn't work out for her, or the second, you know, like, oh, wait, hold on. But it's like, oh, you didn't even have principles. You were just riding this wave of glad handing and positivity into wherever it took you, into whatever prominence, you know, and the bag that you secured. And it's like, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, even worse than that, I mean, like women, like especially in the era of like Lauren Southern and Ashley St. Clair, they acted as tokens, and they would be promoted as like this base right-wing e-girl. And it was because like you wouldn't be allowed to say it if you were a man, but if a hot chick says it, like now it's a bit more passable. Now we can use that, and it's kind of like was like an acid they used. But the whole thing, to me, like I could sit and talk to him blue in the face about feminism, to be quite honest with you. And especially from like a Christian perspective, like it does really irk me too. And like, I'm not here to play games. Like for me, it's not like repeal the fifth wave, feminism or fourth wave. It's like, I'm talking all of it. I'm talking all the way down to the very first wave. And it's kind of crazy too, because when you look at like the actual history of like feminism, everybody remembers like the famous the convention in Sioux Falls, right? Where like they had the big meeting between all of like the pro female leaders at the time.
Was this the suffrage movement, like that one? Or are you talking?
So it was like with, it might not be Susan B. Anthony, but it was
around that time.
Yeah, it was a couple of like those top women in that era.
Okay.
But what people leave out about this, actually, this blew me away when I first learned about it, was that, you know who also attended that meeting and en masse? Was Frederick Douglass. And the reason why Frederick Douglass was there was because they were conjoining the black movement with feminism, because they had to team up together to be able to have actual play when it came to the election. Because outside of that, they weren't going to be able to. They weren't going to have the vote power.
So it's been an unholy marriage. It's been an unholy marriage since the beginning, huh? Like kind of whatever the BLM of the day was and feminism have been a connective.
And that's the intersectionality that people talk about, right?
Yeah.
Like a lot of this is intersectionality, and it ties in that kind of the framing of like they all view themselves as oppressed, which is this oppressor versus oppressed matrix, which, going back to the Israel thing, has always been talked about. The youth from the left wing, they've always been anti-Israel from that perspective because they view Gaza and the Palestinians as being oppressed.
Yeah.
But the reason it never permeated to the right wing, because the right wing doesn't care about the framing, the right wing views that framing as Marxist, but it never permeated because that's all that it was for. They didn't really care so much about like the American people not being out on taxpayer dollars. They didn't care as much that it was like because it was a Jewish state. But the reason the right cares about it is because you bring in the Christian elements of it. You bring in the nationalistic elements of it. And you look at the money being sent there, the people dying in the wars. So that's why a right-winger cares about it. A right-winger cares about it because their people are dying for a cause that they shouldn't be dying for. The left cares about it because of their stupid intersectional politics of like, these are big oppressors and they have more power. They should be doing this. People have less power. And it's very simple kind of framing there.
That was one of the reasons too when I began to become Israel critical, that it was actually kind of a tough hump to get over. Is that like, I agree with these dickbags? You know what I mean? Like, I agree with these fucking progressive twerps, and the thing is, it's like, yeah, you know what? They happen to be right. Their framework of how they got there was wrong. They saw white and brown people. They immediately knew which side that they were on. So, they're still retards and they shouldn't be taken seriously. But no, it was a genuine issue. And the thing I find it's why the left I find just so nefarious is, that is what they care about. That is the dynamic they care about. But what they will use, they'll use the things that you actually care about as like, and the war and the money and the soldiers that die. But meanwhile, they don't actually give a shit. They will just use that as an argument to like manipulate you into agreeing with them because they know that you care about that part.
Right.
Yeah.
What's that meme, right? It's like, I'm not a Christian at all, but let me use this Bible verse against you, knowing that it's going to manipulate you.
Absolutely.
And a lot of that too, but part of the reason why that is, and the reason the left is so successful of playing that card of like, well, Jesus said be nice, and the average Christian goes like, oh no, he didn't he? Is because they're idiots. Yeah. They themselves don't have a strong and robust understanding of the Christian faith. And this is part of like, this is the actual ground element.
Didn't Jesus say, and I'm a new Christian. I'm a neo-Christian. I'm just getting into it myself. I was raised Catholic. My parents were, not religious at all, so I barely attended church as a kid, but I'm starting to get into it now. But didn't Jesus say, he's like, I'm not here to bring peace on earth, I'm a sword? Or I provide, like, it's like, that doesn't sound like the nice guy who's supposed to just accept all the, all the bad things and just be sweet about it.
Right. Yeah. There's multiple mentions of that specifically, but you're spot on, right? I come not to bring peace, but to bring a sword, and it's talking about when he comes back, actually. So this idea of like the return of Jesus is not like going to be this. It'll be essentially coming full circle with everything that was written about, right? And you can go crazy into the theology here, but you can go to even simpler examples of things where it's like, Jesus flipped tables. Like not only did he flip tables, he whipped people. He whipped people in church. Like, and these things are omitted, and largely because of who the people were in the temple, right? Who were the people he was whipping in the temple?
Yeah.
What were they saying? What were they believing?
What was the problem?
Right. And so those get omitted, but it's like, it's the ground level of it. And that's what disheartens me the most is there is such a bad level of contextualization and historical accuracy and actually being concerned with the people in the pews knowing the faith, knowing the stories, knowing the history. And so there's a few different ways you might see this be talked about. I used to throw it around as like gospel only churches, which is like they will preach about like the niceties of Jesus and only from Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. They'll avoid everything else. And there is an element of this that does go to money, which is like, if you were to be you were to be full blown, like we're going to lay down the law, fire and brimstone every week, you're going to be offending your congregation every single day. Because what are you going to be talking about? If you were a Christian in today's society, your top things you need to be talking about need to be feminism, degeneracy, gluttony, and all the things that you would see in your congregation. Meaning every day you need to be making fat jokes, not like at the behest of like at the cost, but you need to be laying that down. And you can see it across the board. You show up to church, the majority of people are overweight. But when's the last time you heard the preacher talk about gluttony?
Yeah.
Like never.
Yeah, absolutely.
And part of that is the fact of that they want these donations to keep coming in. They want the offerings. And part of that is a lot of these guys were just pastors' sons who also got really poor a church upbringing and simply just wanted to continue it. Maybe they don't even really want to do it themselves, but it's the family business essentially.
Yeah.
And there's all these elements where it's like a lot of people say they're Christian, but very, very, very few can actually like give you a robust and comprehensive idea of what it is to be a Christian. And so, for example, a lot of the kind of through lines with Christianity is that if you are like, remember, like Jesus says, remember they persecuted me before you. But what you'll see is, do you think Ali Bestecki is like being persecuted for her Christian faith when she's talking about how girls need to be wives in the home and how to help teach your husbands? No, because that's not Christianity. She's teaching a false message. She's teaching a hybridized, perverted, subverted form of it. But whereas when you see Joel Edmond preach, he's getting attacked and demonized every single time he speaks. And it's like, just in the words of Jesus, that is a heuristic to look at and be like, well, maybe this guy is a bit more right. They hated him for he spoke truth. Like, so you got to look for these kinds of things. And I think a lot of people just lose sight of the basics.
Yeah,
Even
and
more
it's,
so of
well,
the basics.
it's
They don't have
convenient.
the history.
It's convenient to their political ideology, and that's why they do it. That's I mean, that's the whole point. And look, there is pressure to conform. It's like that old Michael Malice thing. It's like conservatives are just progressives driving the speed limit. Like there is pressure to conform. It is a hard fight. You're gonna have to stand on principle, and you're gonna have to have disagreements, and you're gonna have to stand up for your beliefs every day. And that's a lot of work, and that's exhausting. And not everyone wants to do it. A lot of people just want to enjoy their lives. They just want to live the American dream, and it's not something that everyone's equipped for or is incentivized to do. We got to wrap up here pretty soon, but I have a question for you. This was just an idea that hit me the other day, and I might do a video on it, or I might do some research. But I think it has legs. And seeing as how you're kind of like an expert on like feminism, I had this thought, and I was thinking, and it kind of occurred to me, and I was like, women do not have a stake in like demographic collapse or immigration. And I mean this like historically, because if you think about the way countries, would absorb different populations and stuff like that, like in the modern past 5,000 years, the women were not wiped out, but the men were. And the women were sort of absorbed into whatever new tribe it was. So it was kind of like, oh, that's the new power thing. Because I was thinking about it, because I was like, well, if, why don't these people give a shit about their demographic collapse in the United States of America? It's like, oh, because it won't be them that gets killed. It won't be them that get eliminated. They'll just get, absorbed into whatever hegemony is now in control. It'll be me. It'll be you. It'll be like the white guys who are just like, we're out of society. We have no power. In fact, let's just start executing them, Obviously, that's a bit of a bleak potential reality. But I think there is something to that. I think, like, historically, that has kind of been, like, it's the role of men to keep the walls up because they have the most to lose. Like, not to say that women don't lose in war and stuff, but I think as a population, they can be absorbed into the new barbarian horde of the new invader, whereas we do not. We either as slaves or killed, and most likely the latter.
Right. Well, I mean, this is because it is a man's world. In a man's world, a woman is exactly what she always has been, which is secondary to man, and you can go even to the Bible, right? It's, God was created, or man was created in God's image, and woman was created for man. Those are two entirely different creation formats. And I think it does imply an order there. And to your point of the immigration thing, there's a biological element to this as well, too, which is you can even look at this and see it in memes where it's, the guy 30 days after the breakup, and it's like him, sitting lonely on the bench at the park. And then it's like girls 30 days after the breakup, and she's back in the club, like partying. Because they're biologically wired to do so. It's part of their survival. Because they aren't the combative creature, they're much more liable for their protectorate to being eliminated and them having to re and adapt to a new protectorate or a new husband or a new, if they're taken as a war slave, whatever. And you can see it in its biology. But that's also because God designed them that way. Right, knowing that there would be a lot of periods of times of war and instances where this may happen, and it's also partly too like when the husband gets taken out of the picture, if the woman was to also suffer similar levels of grief, the child would be at risk too.
Yeah.
This is like one of the few areas. Oh, go ahead. My bad.
No. But she still needs to acquire resources to raise her young. So it behooves her, and it's probably a behavior that just, became more and more prominent because, like winning traits win out over history is that, like if you're adaptable into who your provider can be, then you have a better chance of providing for your offspring in a long-term scenario.
Exactly. And even in addition to that, like, they don't have a stake in the military conquest either, right? Like, this is one of the biggest things I think you can point to at right now that's like on paper, which is if we were to go to war, the women aren't going.
Right.
And even if a lot of them wanted to, there'd be a bunch of men who are saying, like, you're not going. And then they wouldn't have a choice either, because if it came to force doctrine, the men would be keeping the women from going.
Yeah.
And so there is an element of that too, which is, in the period of like demanding for equal rights, equal responsibilities has yet to arrive to the desk of women. And I think that's continually one of these driving things that, underpins a lot of the frustration, where I think some guys might even move to the position of like, they even would be fine, which I don't agree with this, but they would be fine with everything as is. They're just like, but make them go at draft eligible.
Right.
I mean, that shows you how far removed we are from Christianity, because no Christian man would be like, yeah, and send my wife to war. Like, that's showing you how far we are. It's inverted.
It's nuts. And, interestingly, when we were talking about like women's suffrage and the first movements of feminism and stuff, that was actually, because I did a little research on this during the last election, and that's actually like the right to vote was attached to your draft status as a man. That was why you had the right, because the thinking was you have a stake in this. If you're going to vote for someone who's going to bring you to war, well, you should have the ability to vote for who that's going to be, or at least make your voice heard, at least on a small level. Whereas like women just do not have that stake. They're just not part of it. And it's like, that's that thing. It's like, well, we should make women draft eligible. That's that pressure to conform to progressive values, like even if you disagree with them, because this is a compromise. It's like, we need to just completely abandon that type of compromise. We need to be pushing, they shouldn't be in any kind of combat scenario whatsoever. It's like, historically, women have always contributed on the battlefield when it comes to like medic and stuff like that and rear guard things. Like, that's all fine. But in combat positions, absolutely not. That's crazy. What are we doing?
And luckily, speaking to that fact, there was a recent, I can't remember where I'd seen this posted, but supposedly the United States military is getting ready to begin doing combat effectiveness on women on their combat roles. And it's a non-brainer. I mean, the thing is this is just going to be like an exercise. You don't need to do an exercise. We already have all the statistics that we need. I mean, when you look at policing data, you can just look at general military data as we already have it, right? When you compare some of these Green Beret groups and these Marine groups that had women, that didn't have women, the times of operations, the people who were having to get drug, always the women. And then you just look at the basic stuff, which is like the actual like capabilities. You look at things like hand-eye coordination, spatial awareness, reaction time.
Strength.
All of those things are heavily out of women's favor, and it's like at a certain point, why are we even negotiating? They shouldn't be here.
Dude, I'm 210 pounds. I don't know a single woman in my life who could pick me up and carry me off a battlefield. I don't know one. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know a single one that could do it. And so it's like that alone. That one factor alone. But do have to wrap up this show. Dude, thank you so much for doing this. This was great.
Thank you for having me, man. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, man.
Here.
Please tell everyone like where we can find what you, what your streaming schedule, all that stuff. Let them know.
Yeah, no, definitely. I didn't realize until we were about like halfway through that my tag is sitting right here. So both on YouTube and X. If you caught that through the show, you can find me there. And then the overlay icon up here, that is the icon for the New American Vision. You can find us there at NAV_creators. But for me on YouTube, it's just at Atlas Thugged, no spaces at all. But I appreciate you very much, man, for bringing me on and Foulball Productions. I appreciate seeing your content. I know I subscribed to you.
Thank you.
I believe about 2 months ago or so when you had reached out to me the first time. And appreciate what you're doing, man. I think it's good that you're collecting all the all of the right-wing internet guys on the side.
This has been my obsession, ever since I discovered you guys. I've just been like blown away because not only it helps that I agree with you, but it's not just that. It's the fact that you guys are so organized in your principles and you make very like declarative statements. You know, there's not a lot of compromise, and I just admire it. And I did, like I said, I wasn't even aware of that you guys were out there. I didn't even know there was this like growing like Praetorian Guard. You know what I mean, out there of just these like dudes with sharp swords, and it's like, wow, these guys are so cool. So yeah, I look forward to talking to more, and you know, maybe you again. Hopefully, I think that would be great. Like I want to I watch you guys. You know, I watch your stuff. I watch Tom Foe. I watch the Right Wing Coalition. Like you guys are just really interesting, and I don't think everyone's quite aware of just how impactful your generation's going to be over the next 10, 20 years. I think people do not understand it yet. You know, I think they think Nick Fuentes is just this sort of like bother, you know, at the moment. But no, this is not going away. This is a generational shift of a level I don't think we've seen maybe since the 60s. So
yes,
this is big.
And I would say there's two. Credit to Nick Fuentes first and foremost. I think for me, maybe a bit less so because I was kind of tuned into him a little bit later on. But I would imagine for a lot of these other guys like Tom Foe and others, that he has been like probably their primary source of like where to go to, where to get, you know, getting information and things to look up afterwards. But there was an era, and there still is. They get censored like crazy. There is an era in a group of men that are older that all kind of did away with this a long time ago too. And because they existed in the most darkest of times on the internet, nobody knows who they are. And so they succeeded on that end. And one other person I'd point people to, he's a bit more Orthodox Christian, but Jeff Younger.
Okay.
Jeff Younger, I always consider myself an acolyte of Jeff Younger. I listened to him even before he had the transition issue with the children that got taken to California, you know, because I don't know if you know this story.
I do. No, yeah. No, it's a lot of this actually existed in the corners of the internet and stuff like that. I went to college, it's 20 years ago now, and I took a gender studies course because I was completely oblivious to what like all this progressive rhetoric was, and I was like, oh, that'll be interesting. You know, we'll kind of see like gender roles like in society. You know, it was white men are evil and the cause of all these reasons. But because I hated it so much, it forced me to write like a paper of kind of gender discrimination from the perspective of a man, and I did all this research, and it was so hard to find information back then because it only existed in these very rare corners, and there was also just so much genuine misogyny that was just like fucking women, you know, and it was like, okay, this is useless. Like, but digging through, you did find really interesting stuff, and yeah, there have been pioneers out there who you know, said the uncomfortable things and pointed out the uncomfortable truths when there was no safety net. It was like, talk about being extricated from society. It's like we didn't even have a word for canceling back then.
Right, exactly. And but this is great, man. I appreciate it. I would be more than happy to come back on a second time.
Hell yeah, man.
And I do want to say too, I love hearing the fact that you're getting a lot more involved in Christianity. I know for a lot of people it's a very uncomfortable step. I just want to say, reach out to me if you want any resources for that. You want to look for anybody to listen to, any of that. Feel free to reach out to me on that end.
That's rad. Thank you for that olive branch. I appreciate it. Yeah, it's been you know, it's been kind of a weird journey because I've always had what I felt like was a relationship with God, not like in a insincere or disingenuous way, in a very deep, real way. But I never took the leap of embracing Jesus Christ until very, very recently. It's like maybe the past year. So it's been like this, you know, it's been like this beautiful journey, but it's, you know, it's kind of like, you know, raised as like a millennial that kind of scoffs at religion. There's kind of like this old programming that I have to kind of work through and just debug. I got to debug my brain to, you know, of Christ's love. But
tradition.
Yeah. But anyway, man, this was fucking fantastic. Once again, thank you so much. And everybody, you know, check out Atlas Thugs. He's doing a lot of great stuff. His Feminism Theory, our series, I'm really excited to check out. So please watch it. And thank you guys very much for watching the MFer Podcast. And I'll see you all next week. Y'all have a great day.